You're listening to Arin It Out, a podcast that inspires everyday people to lead with purpose in their careers, communities, and callings. I'm Arin Patterson, TEDx speaker, leadership strategist, and culture architect. I'm passionate about helping people discover their strengths, develop their skills, and do meaningful and fulfilling work. Through honest conversations and real reflections, we'll explore what it truly takes to lead well, not just in the work that you do, but in who you become. Because it's not about the title you wear, it's about the stretch, the setbacks, and the silent wins along the way. Are you ready to grow, lead, and leave your mark? If so, let's begin. Hey y'all, welcome back to another episode of Arin It Out, the podcast where we talk leadership, lessons, and life. I'm your host, Arin Patterson, and I'm so glad you're here. Today's episode 2 of season 2, is entitled Look Again. In this episode, we're talking about identity, perception, and the importance of revisiting conclusions we've accepted as permanent. If you've ever written off a dream, a relationship, a career path, or even yourself, I hope you'll stick around for this conversation. I was sitting on my sofa the other day thinking about my next TED Talk. And I don't know when it's going to happen or what city it's going to take place, but I started playing with this idea, just 2 simple words: look again. And the more I sat with that, the more I realized how often we make permanent decisions based on temporary information. We decide a dream isn't possible. We decide a relationship is beyond repair. We decide someone will never change. We decide we aren't capable. And then life quietly hands us new information. But we never go back to revisit that original conclusion. We update our phones. We update our resumes. We update our wardrobes. But many of us are still making life decisions with outdated information. And maybe, just maybe, today is your invitation to simply look again. Now, as I sat with this idea, I kept thinking, look again, it's not like supposed to be a cute message. It's really supposed to be a mindset that we take. It's the willingness to admit that what you believed yesterday may not be a complete picture for today. And I think there's 4 areas of our lives where practicing that mindset can completely change the way that we lead. It can change the way that we work, and really can change the way that we live our lives. So the 4 areas I want us to talk about today are looking again at yourself, at others, your dreams, and your circumstances. So the first area to look again is to look at yourself. Sometimes the person holding you back is a version of yourself that no longer exists. How many of us are still introducing ourselves as a previous version of ourselves? You know, maybe you've been telling yourself for years that you are shy when you were shy as a child, but as an adult, you're no longer shy. Or maybe you're telling people that you don't feel like you're equipped to be a good leader. But who told you that? Where did you get that information from? And have you looked again to see all of the things that you've learned and the knowledge you've gained and the experiences you've had to say, oh, actually, no, I do have the bones of what it takes to be a good leader. Maybe there's still some growth that needs to take place, but you're definitely not where you used to be. Or maybe do you tell yourself that you are undisciplined, and because you've struggled to do one thing, you have classified your entire life or your entire self as being undisciplined. But if you get up and you go to work and you work in the office every single day at 9 a.m., let me tell you something. You are disciplined. Discipline exists within you. Or maybe it's through some other lens or some other idea that you have had about yourself that was true a year ago, 5 years ago, even 10 years ago, but today it no longer appropriately represents who you are. And you've got to ask yourself, where did that idea come from? Where did that mindset come from? Was it from someone who said something to you in middle school? Was it from one bad leader that you worked for? Did you have an interview that went terribly and you've framed your entire personality and identity around that one situation? Was it one relationship, a friendship that went sideways? One singular embarrassing moment? At some point, you've collected evidence and created identity around one thing that truly doesn't represent who you are. But identities are not meant to be prisons. Who you were in 2020 doesn't have to be who you are today. And for many of you, especially those of you guys that listen to podcasts like mine, I know that you're committed to growth. I know that you're committed to developing yourself. I know that you're committed to being a better version of yourself. So I challenge you that you are not who you were, and you need to look again at yourself. Look at all the new evidence that has been presented in your life, that you have done, the things that you've accomplished, so that you can update your identity of yourself. In psychology, there's this concept of a growth mindset. We can compare a fixed mindset with a growth mindset. And the growth mindset simply suggests that people generally approach abilities in one of two ways. That either you look from a fixed mindset that says, this is who I am, or a growth mindset that says, this is who I am right now. This is not who I'm always going to be. And the difference between the two is incredibly important. A growth mindset, it doesn't ignore reality. It simply refuses to believe that today's reality is permanent. So whatever stage of life you are in, whatever challenges you are facing, whatever identities you have today, don't necessarily have to be who you are tomorrow. You can be a disciplined person tomorrow. You can be a person of integrity tomorrow. You can be someone who is a scholar tomorrow. It all depends on what thoughts are you thinking about yourself today. So I challenge you to look again at yourself. Look again at how you've shown up in the world. Look again at how you're presenting yourself to others. If you would have asked me as a teenager, or even in my early years in college, if you would have asked me what I would enjoy doing the most, or what I would even be most skilled in, I don't think that I would tell you that public speaking was going to be in my top 3 of abilities or skills. I don't think that would have ever even I don't think that would have crossed my mind. Even in high school, I started to do theater, and it was really just something to kind of pass the time because I wasn't sure what I was skilled at. Little did I know that the practice of performing and standing in front of people would be setting me up for the life that I'm living today. That, I'm hosting a podcast. I do public speaking. I typically lead in a lot of spaces, which causes me to be vocal in front of large groups of people. But I could not have told you that version of Arin at 16, 17, 20 years old could not have fathomed who I was going to be today. And, I had my own thoughts and dreams of what my life would look like at that time. But who I am today is a different version, a version that I really couldn't have crafted up myself at that time. And I'm sure the same can be said for you. Where in your life are you still operating from an old identity? Where are you still imagining yourself as a 16-year-old, as a 17-year-old, as a 20-year-old in college, as a brand new professional? Where are you still identifying yourself as a version of you that no longer exists? You've got to look again. You've got to look at yourself again. Now, the second area you have to look again is at others. Look again at others. We often relate to people based on who they were instead of who they're becoming, or even who they are right now. In psychology, there's this concept called the primacy effect. And it simply suggests that first impressions disproportionately influence our perceptions. Now, imagine you have a coworker who starts, or an employee, and one of them, let's say there's 2 people, one of them starts very strong, and then later down the road struggles some. And then there's one who maybe starts off in a place of struggle, but then they dramatically improve. Many managers, many bosses, many coworkers will still speak very highly of the first person who started off strong because of how we view first impressions. And they will still rate the other person who has improved as not doing as well. Why is that? Because our brains love to take shortcuts. We'll say we love the first impressions, and this is why it's so important to manage perceptions through first impressions. But also, you have to realize that first impressions aren't and should not be lasting impressions in every situation. And on top of that, I don't know if you've ever heard of confirmation bias, but simply our brains are looking for things to confirm what we decided was true from the onset. So for the employee who started off strong, we are now looking for confirmation that this employee will continue to be strong, even when they're not. So we're looking at only the things that they do that are good, only the things that they do that are strong, only the things that fit that narrative that we've created in our minds, instead of recognizing that, yes, they may have started off strong, but where they are right now doesn't represent the strength that they started with. And and this can be looked at in a positive or negative way, because there's some employees who may have been just in a terrible space in life, and that's poured over into their work life. And we're continuing to look at them through that lens or through that season that they were once in. But what about when things in their life shift and they're able to come to work in a better space? They're able to show up as a better version of themselves. Are you able to look at them and say, wow, they've really changed. They've really adjusted some things? Or are you still looking at them through that time when they weren't doing so well? Have you adjusted your perception of other people, the people that you work with, the people that you live with, the people that you hang out with on the weekends? Because every single one of us to some degree is constantly changing. We just need to make sure we're constantly updating our perception of people as we're interacting with them. And if you want to be a great leader, you have to be someone who challenges your assumptions. You've got to ask yourself the question, what am I missing? What new information have I not considered? You've got to really to figure out, is there evidence that this person has changed? And not just looking at or thinking back to your memory or looking in your memory to dictate who they are today, but let's look at reality. Let's look at what's actually happening right now. And this isn't just a concept that applies to work. This applies to your family. This applies to your parents and your siblings, and to your friends, to someone that you're dating. It applies to yourself, that all of these people deserve another look. You've got to look again. And here's the important nuance. Looking again simply requires curiosity. I'm not saying that every person who showed you bad information to start with is worthy of being in your inner circle, but it does require some level of curiosity. And I want you to ask yourself the question, who in my life have I frozen in time? I met them in 2019, and that's how I'm still interacting with them as the version that I met in 2019. In terms of relationships, in terms of friendships, in terms of relationships with your coworkers. Am I still operating based on this version that they demonstrated to me then, or have I allowed new information to enter the chat? And the third area that you have to look again is to look again at your dreams. Look again at your dreams. This one is probably one of the harder conversations, especially for those of you all that are like me, that are extremely ambitious, that have big dreams for your life. And sometimes you pursue a dream and it doesn't work out, and you begin to really just wonder, was this the right dream? And I would challenge you that that's actually not the right question, if it was the right dream or not. Usually it's a question of, was this the right timing? Was I around the right people? There's a lot of other things to ask yourself about the dream that have nothing to do with the dream itself, if you will. Maybe your dream or your idea didn't fail. Maybe it was the version of yourself that was pursuing a specific dream. Maybe that version wasn't ready yet. Maybe that version of you wasn't mature enough yet. Maybe that version of you didn't have enough money to pursue that dream. So you've got to look again at those dreams. I don't want you to say to yourself, I've tried that and it didn't work. No, I want you to go look again at it. I want you to pick up the pen, pick up the paper, pick up that idea that you had and go and look again with fresh eyes, with fresh perspective, with fresh and new growth and development that's happened in you. Go look again at your dreams. And we talked about this some last week. I mentioned a little bit about disappointment and, not fulfilling a dream or not accomplishing something that you thought you would. It doesn't mean that you're not capable. Sometimes it just means it's not the right timing, or this was not the right opportunity, or there's some other level of preparation that you need to take in order to achieve that dream. So don't write off your dreams simply because they haven't happened. Don't write off your dreams simply because you feel like you failed once and that you'll fail again, because that's not always the case. So when you think about your life, what dream have you said is impossible, but you've been using information that's outdated? Is it some next level of a job that you want to take on? Is it something related to a personal business? Um, do you see yourself changing industries, becoming an entrepreneur, writing a book, starting a podcast? What is it? What dream did you have that failed before, that you have failed to re-pursue because you're still using old information about yourself and about that dream? I feel very strongly about this. I'm someone who's always working on projects. I'm always pursuing new levels of growth, and I just think there's so many opportunities for us to revisit dreams that we've had. And I want to kind of challenge you that in this year, I want you to think back to dreams that you had in previous times in life and consider which ones do you need to pick back up, because a new version of you exists now. The version of you that initially had the dream is not the version of you that exists today, but the version of you today is ready to do whatever is required to achieve that dream. I challenge you in that. And the fourth area that you need to look again is at your circumstances. And, I would say look again at your circumstances or simply at your life. We often make permanent decisions based on temporary circumstances. Whatever's happening in your life right now, again, it is not necessarily forever. The place that you live right now is not where you will live forever. The place where you go to work every day right now is not necessarily where you'll go to work every day forever. Our lives are and can constantly change and adjust, and we have more power to apply some changes than probably we even recognize or realize for ourselves. I need you to stop saying that you're never going to find a new job, that the job market's so terrible. I need you to stop saying that. I need you to recognize just how powerful your words are. You will find a new job because you've gained new skills. You're in a new place of maturity and growth, and the right opportunity that you are seeking is also seeking you. That's got to be the kind of mindset that you have. I need you to stop saying that you're always going to be single. You may be single right now, but if you are desiring a relationship, the right relationship is also seeking you. I need you to stop saying things like, I'm not going to achieve this. I can't make this much money. I can't do this. I can't do that. Stop saying those things. Those things apply to where your life is right now, but that may not necessarily be your reality even as soon as tomorrow. Things can change in an instant. And I want you to begin reframing how you view, all of these things. Today we're talking about looking again at yourself, looking again at others, looking again at your dreams, and looking again at just the circumstances of life. But I want you to begin to reframe some of these things, that the rejection you received from a job interview Maybe it wasn't just rejection. Maybe it was redirection. Maybe you were headed in a path or in a direction that wasn't exactly what you should be doing. So look at that rejection as redirection. Or maybe the delay that you've been experiencing as it relates to getting this new job is just more opportunity for you to prepare so that you will be literally the best that you could possibly be when the opportunity arises. Or maybe that time that you found yourself disappointed was really an opportunity to protect you from something that would have really harmed you more down the road. I want you to begin reframing this. And, I can share with you so many times in my own life where I've had to reframe and had to look again at different circumstances. I mean, many of you know that though I just finished grad school, yay, um, this was not the first or the second time that I started grad school. I literally started grad school for a third time. And I said to myself, Arin, this is it. You're going to finish this. But what if I had stopped at the first time and said, man, it didn't work out right after undergrad, so I'm not going back to school? Or what if when I went back, I think it was about 7 years later, what if I said then it didn't work out this time either? Man, I'm definitely not going back now. But sometimes I needed the right program. I needed the right timing. I needed the right work situation. And all of those things came together the third time. It didn't happen like that the first time. It didn't happen like that the second time. But it did happen. It did happen. So I want you to consider, what conclusions have you accepted as permanent that deserves new information? What conclusions about your life and about your circumstances have you accepted as permanent that deserve new information? As you continue to reflect on this information, I simply want you to ask yourself, what do I know now that I didn't know then? What do I know now that I didn't know then? Because sometimes the answer is not to try harder. Is simply to look again. I don't think looking again is about second chances. That's really not what I'm trying to communicate with this message. Looking again is more about this concept of intellectual humility. It's the willingness to admit that you may not have a complete picture anymore of a person, of a situation, of whatever it is. It's about recognizing that life is dynamic and refusing to let an old picture become your permanent identity. Maybe wisdom isn't always about knowing the answer. Maybe wisdom is being willing to revisit the question. This week, I want you to revisit one conclusion that you have accepted as permanent, whether it's about a person, a relationship, a dream, a circumstance, or quite frankly, even yourself. And ask yourself, what new information do I have now that I didn't have then? What new information do I have now that I didn't have then? And in some cases, you may discover that nothing has changed. But I believe in a lot of cases, you'll discover that so much has changed. If today's episode resonated with you, here's how you can help keep the conversation going. If you're listening on YouTube, go ahead and like this video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss a new episode. And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, make sure you follow the show and leave a rating or a review. It helps more people find these conversations. Share this episode with a friend, a family member, or a colleague who might need a fresh perspective, or a reminder that people, circumstances, and even dreams can change when you're willing to take a second look. And finally, connect with me on LinkedIn or send me an email at hello@arinpatterson.com. I love to hear about a career or leadership success, a challenge you're currently working through, or something in your own life that you've decided to look differently at. Next week, we're talking about one of the biggest obstacles to growth, comparison. Because comparison has a way of making us blind to our own progress, convincing us we're behind, and stealing the joy from the process. Thanks again for joining me for another episode of Arin It Out. I'm so glad you were here today. I can't wait to see you next time. Have a good one.